So when we look around American society, increasingly people find it difficult to find a common ground regarding history for reasons such as American slavery and segregation, the Trail of Tears, and other really difficult and painful stories regarding our Black and Native American neighbors. Sometimes American history is disregarded. Like, people are losing confidence that the American founding is true, given the endurance of American slavery for so many years. It's also the case that increasingly Americans are losing confidence in Western culture. So more broadly, the historical sources from antiquity, for example, ancient Athens, ancient Rome, ancient Jerusalem, increasingly people find it difficult to see how these are meaningful and purposeful to us. When I think about history, and I've been very interested in this for a number of years, as a teacher talking to fellow teachers, can we find a common ground? I think we can. And I think a good place to start is with the language we use and the kind of education that we have. So we talk about a classical education, which immediately invokes history. Classical, right off the bat, invokes classical Greece and Rome. Classics are standouts in their time, great works all the way from Homer to more recent works, say by Hemingway, Flannery O'Connor, Seamus Heaney. We're talking about works that stand out in their time and yet also endure, at least across multiple generations, if not multiple centuries. That's one notion of our education has to do with what is classical. We also talk about the ends or the purposes of an education, which is summed up as liberal. And what we mean by liberal is the root word, which means freedom. That is, we educate our students to intellectual freedom. We want them to think with the best habits of mind about every sphere of reality, about God, about society, about our humanity, and about the world around us. So I want to propose that when we get our bearings concerning history, we think in terms of both our classical origins, that is where we come from historically, and also our liberal purposes, that we want to develop a notion of history that actually frees our students to see what the past frees them to see. Toward that, I want to propose that there are two special habits of mind that we as teachers of history should try to cultivate among our students. One I call observation. And it may seem really obvious that when we're looking at anything, we want to observe it closely and in all its detail. Sometimes within the constraints that we find ourselves in with American society, events in the past are reduced to less than what they really are, maybe for ideological purposes, partisan politics, and things like that. But the liberal mind says we never reduce anything to less than what it is. And when we're looking at the past, we need to see it fully in its pastness, with all its details, with as much thoroughness, as broad and as deep and as high a grasp of it as we possibly can muster. The second major habit of mind that we want to foster among our students is what I call sympathy. Now, sympathy in its root meaning, first of all, means to suffer with someone else. And it's a fact of life that all humans suffer. So it's part of human condition. It's also part of life that some suffering is imposed by some people on others. And those kinds of events, though very painful to look at because we don't like to examine human failure, nonetheless, they're really important. So that's one notion of sympathy. Another broader notion of sympathy is that we have a natural affinity for all things human. So when we look at history, we're looking at the drama of the entirety of our humanity. And sometimes humans achieve great things, noble things at great sacrifice. At other times, humans do horribly egregious things to one another. On either end of the spectrum, we need to study these events because it's part of the human story. But then it becomes incumbent on us to decide, how is it we measure the one as egregious or bad and the other one as good? And in other words, we're looking at not just the isolated events, but we really are exploring the depth and the height and the breadth of our humanity. How do we measure these things?